The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the polished hardwood floor of James Garrison's study. At 75, his posture remained military straight as he guided his 12-year-old grandson through the collected artifacts of his life. The walls were adorned with photographs spanning decades, medals displayed in protective cases, and bookshelves filled with military histories. The boy stopped at a glass cabinet showcasing a meticulously detailed model of an M1A1 Abrams tank. Its desert camouflage pattern faded slightly with age. Young Matthew reached toward a faded photograph tucked beside the model. The image showed a dust-covered soldier standing atop a tank, smoke billowing in the background across an endless desert. The man in the photo wore a triumphant yet haunted expression. Matthew carefully extracted the photograph. "Is this you, Grandpa?" James Garrison fell silent, his weathered hand trembling slightly as he accepted the photograph. The room seemed to grow quieter as he stared at the image, transported across 30 years in an instant. 73 Easting, he whispered, the words emerging with the weight of history. "I haven't looked at this in years." "What's 73 Easting?" Matthew asked, leaning closer to study the image. James settled into his leather chair, the springs creaking beneath his weight. "Sit down, son. It's time I told you about the greatest tank battle since World War II and how your grandfather learned what it truly means to be a soldier." The boy sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes wide with anticipation. James closed his eyes, and the study around him faded away, replaced by the memories of a life forever changed by 23 minutes in the Iraqi desert. Pennsylvania, 1965 to 1985. James Garrison was born into the legacy of war. The modest family home in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, stood less than a mile from Cemetery Ridge, where Union forces had repelled Pickett's charge over a century before. As a boy, he would spend hours exploring the battlefield monuments, tracing the inscriptions with small fingers, absorbing the weight of sacrifice they represented. His father, Colonel William Garrison, had served as an infantry officer in Korea, returning home with a Purple Heart and nightmares he never discussed. His uncle Robert had been a Marine in Vietnam, and both of his grandfathers had fought in World War II. Military service wasn't merely expected in the Garrison household. It was the family's North Star, guiding every significant decision. Young James was different from his cousins. While they played baseball and football, he immersed himself in history books, studying battle tactics in military campaigns. By age 10, he could recite the details of Patton's Third Army advance across Europe or explain the strategic brilliance of MacArthur's Incheon landing. His father noticed this scholarly interest with a mixture of pride and concern. "Knowledge is valuable, son," William told him one evening, "but a soldier must also be physically ready. Books won't stop bullets." The next day, James found himself enrolled in the local wrestling program. The discipline of the sport appealed to him immediately. On the mat, success depended entirely on personal commitment and preparation. There was no team to blame for failure, no external factors to consider. You either executed properly or you lost. By his sophomore year of high school, James had transformed from a bookish history enthusiast to a formidable athlete, captain of the wrestling team, while maintaining his academic excellence. His bedroom walls featured an unusual combination of historical maps and wrestling tournament brackets. His father assumed James would apply to West Point, following the path of 3 previous generations of Garrison men. The colonel had already spoken to his congressional representative about a nomination, but James surprised everyone with his decision. "I want to attend Arizona State," he announced at dinner one evening during his senior year. His father set down his fork, expression unreadable. "Arizona? That's across the country. And what about West Point?" "I'll join ROTC at ASU," James explained. "I'll still become an officer, but I want a real college experience first." William studied his son for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Your life, your decision. Just remember what it means to be a Garrison." James never forgot. Throughout his college years, he excelled in both academics and ROTC training. His instructors noted his natural leadership abilities and tactical acumen. When it came time to select his branch of service, everyone expected infantry or intelligence, given his analytical mind. Again, James defied expectations. The transformation happened during advance camp at Fort Lewis, Washington, during the summer before his senior year. The Army had arranged branch demonstration days with representatives from each branch showcasing their capabilities. The infantry presentation was predictably intense, with soldiers rappelling from helicopters. The artillery demonstration featured thunderous firepower. But when the armor branch took the field, everything changed. An M1 Abrams tank crested a nearby hill, its turbine engine roaring like a caged beast. Mud flew from the treads as it executed a series of tight maneuvers, demonstrating speed and agility that seemed impossible for a 60-ton vehicle. The main gun tracked smoothly, engaging multiple targets with precision. When the tank finally halted before the assembled cadets, the commander emerged from the turret. Captain Mike Reynolds was barely 5'7", dwarfed by his machine, yet radiating absolute confidence. "This," he announced, patting the turret, "is America's fist. When we hit, the enemy stays hit." That evening, James submitted his branch preference form. Armor was his first, second, and third choice. Upon graduation in 1908, Second Lieutenant James Garrison received his commission and orders to the Armor Officer Basic Course at Fort Knox, Kentucky. For 5 months, he immersed himself in the technical aspects of armored warfare, from maintenance procedures to gunnery skills. He qualified as a tank commander with distinguished scores, impressing even the veteran instructors with his attention to detail and tactical creativity. His reward was a plum assignment, the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment in West Germany, the tip of America's spear facing the Warsaw Pact across the Iron Curtain. West Germany, 1989. The rain fell steadily across the German countryside as Lieutenant Garrison reported for duty at the 2nd ACR headquarters in Nuremberg. The massive stone barracks, originally built for Hitler's SS troops, carried an oppressive weight of history that matched the leaden sky overhead. The regimental adjutant, a harried captain with perpetually smudged glasses, barely looked up from his paperwork as he processed Garrison's arrival. "You're assigned to Eagle Troop, 2nd Squadron," he said, stamping forms with mechanical efficiency. "Captain Henderson is your troop commander. You'll be taking 2nd Platoon. 4 tanks, 16 men. Welcome to the frontier, Lieutenant." Garrison's first impression of Eagle Troop was less than inspiring. Captain Henderson, a balding officer in his late 30s, seemed more concerned with paperwork than combat readiness. The troop's performance in recent field exercises had been mediocre, with gunnery scores well below regimental standards. The troop first sergeant, a heavy-set man named Pullman, assigned Garrison a platoon sergeant with a reputation for reliability. "Sergeant First Class Eddie Wallace," Pullman said. "We call him Steady Eddie. 22 years in service, 3 tours in Vietnam, knows tanks better than the engineers who designed them. Learn from him and you'll be fine." SFC Wallace proved to be everything Garrison could hope for in a platoon sergeant. At 45, the Georgia native had a quiet, deliberate manner that commanded respect without demanding it. His dark skin was weathered from decades of field exercises, and his hands bore the calluses and oil stains of a man who believed maintenance was a sacred duty. Their first meeting set the tone for their relationship. "Lieutenant," Wallace said, extending a hand like weathered oak, "I'll teach you everything I know about tanks. In return, you protect this platoon from headquarters bullshit. Deal?" Garrison grinned. "Deal." Wallace introduced him to the platoon, 16 men who would become the most important people in Garrison's world. Among them were characters who would shape his understanding of leadership. Specialist Charles Batubin stood barely 5'4", with a wrestler's compact build and explosive energy. The son of Filipino immigrants, he had enlisted to earn citizenship and found a home in the Army. Despite his size, he could load the main gun faster than men with 6 inches on him, earning the nickname Mighty Mouse. Sergeant Scott McReynolds was Batubin's opposite in every way. Tall, lanky, and laconic, the Alabama native rarely spoke more than 5 words at a time. But behind a gunner's sight, he transformed into an artist of destruction. His ability to hit moving targets at maximum range had earned him the call sign, Deadeye, in a collection of gunnery trophies. Garrison's first months with Eagle Troop fell into a predictable rhythm. Days spent maintaining vehicles, nights in the field practicing maneuvers, and regular rotations to the border outposts watching Soviet and East German forces across the frontier. It was during one such border rotation in November 1989 that history intervened in Garrison's career. Eagle Troop was manning Observation Post Alpha near the East German town of Rasdorf when the unthinkable happened. The Berlin Wall fell. Garrison watched in amazement as German citizens from both sides swarmed across checkpoints that had been sealed for decades. The border guards who had shot to kill just days before now stood by helplessly as the Iron Curtain dissolved before their eyes. For a soldier trained to fight the Soviet juggernaut, it was a surreal experience. The enemy they had prepared to battle for years was evaporating without a shot fired. That evening, Garrison found Wallace sitting alone on their tank, smoking a rare cigar as he watched the celebration through night vision goggles. "What happens to us now, Sergeant Wallace?" Garrison asked, climbing up beside him. Wallace took a long pull on his cigar, the ember glowing bright in the darkness. "World still needs soldiers, sir. Tyrants don't disappear just because one wall comes down." His words proved prophetic sooner than either man expected. The catalyst, February 1990. 3 months after the wall fell, Eagle Troop received a new commander. Captain Robert "Bobby" Mitchell arrived with a reputation that preceded him. A West Point graduate with a master's degree in military history from Georgetown, Mitchell had served as an aide to General Norman Schwarzkopf before requesting a return to troop command. At 30, Mitchell was barely 5 years older than Garrison, but carried himself with the confidence of a man twice his age. His first meeting with the troop's officers established his expectations with crystal clarity. "Gentlemen," Mitchell said, pacing before them in the troop classroom, "I've reviewed our performance records for the past year. They're unacceptable. This regiment has a proud history dating back to the frontier cavalry. We will not tarnish that legacy on my watch." He fixed each officer with a penetrating stare. "We have 3 months to prepare for evaluation at Hohenfels. I expect nothing less than the highest scores in the regiment." Questions? There were none. Mitchell transformed Eagle Troop with methodical intensity. Training hours extended, maintenance standards tightened, every procedure, from radio protocols to gunnery sequences, was rehearsed until it became muscle memory. Garrison initially resented the increased demands, particularly Mitchell's habit of calling unexpected alerts in the middle of the night. But results were undeniable. After just 6 weeks, platoon gunnery scores had improved by 30%. The real test came at the Combat Maneuver Training Center in Hohenfels, where units faced realistic opposition forces in simulated combat. Eagle Troop's previous evaluation had been disastrous, with the OPFAOR destroying most of their vehicles before they even made contact with the main enemy force. Under Mitchell's leadership, the outcome couldn't have been more different. Eagle Troop executed a textbook movement to contact, using terrain to mask their advance before striking the Opfer from an unexpected direction. The opposing commander later admitted they had barely left their assembly area before Eagle Troop was upon them. At the after-action review, the senior evaluator singled out Garrison's platoon for special recognition. Second platoon demonstrated exceptional tactical discipline and fire control. "Lieutenant Garrison, your use of micro-terrain to conceal your advance was exemplary." That evening, Mitchell found Garrison inspecting his tanks. "Good work today, Lieutenant," Mitchell said, his typically stern expression softened slightly. "You have a knack for armor tactics." "Thank you, sir," Garrison replied, surprised by the rare compliment. Mitchell hesitated, then continued in a lower voice. "How would you feel about taking over 3rd Platoon?" "Our scout platoon." Garrison couldn't hide his shock. In the cavalry, the scout platoon leader position was typically reserved for officers who had already commanded a tank platoon for at least a year. "The scouts, sir? I've only been in the troop for 5 months." Mitchell nodded. "I know, but I need someone with your attention to detail and tactical sense. Scout platoon is the eyes of the troop. Without good intelligence, the rest of us are blind." The offer was both an honor and a challenge. The scout platoon operated Bradley fighting vehicles instead of Abrams tanks, required entirely different tactical approaches, and carried enormous responsibility for the safety of the entire troop. "When would I transfer?" Garrison asked. "After gunnery next month, assuming your platoon qualifies distinguished, of course." It was a test within a test. Mitchell was offering opportunity, but only if Garrison proved worthy. "We'll qualify distinguished, sir," Garrison promised. Mitchell's smile was brief but genuine. "I know you will, Lieutenant. That's why I'm asking you." The challenge, April 1990. The gunnery range at Grafenbohr training area sprawled across the Bavarian countryside, a landscape scarred by decades of tank rounds and artillery shells. For tankers, Graf was hallowed ground, the ultimate test of their skills. Garrison had prepared his crews meticulously. Every man knew his role, every procedure had been rehearsed hundreds of times. The platoon had spent countless hours in the simulator, practicing target acquisition and engagement sequences. Yet as they prepared for qualification, an unexpected problem emerged. None of the crews across the entire squadron could hit their targets consistently. Shots fell short or sailed over targets that should have been easily destroyed. After 2 days of frustration, squadron leadership called an emergency meeting. The squadron commander, Lieutenant Colonel Harris, made his displeasure abundantly clear. "This is unacceptable," he snapped, glaring at the assembled officers. "The regiment has always led USAREER in gunnery scores. Now we can't hit the broadside of a barn. I want answers." Mitchell spoke up. "Sir, I believe there's a systemic issue. Every crew is experiencing the same problem, regardless of experience level." Harris dismissed the suggestion with a wave. "The issue is training, Captain. Your crews aren't following proper procedures." The meeting ended with a threat. Any platoon failing to qualify would have its leader relieved. The message couldn't have been clearer. Fix the problem or end your career. Garrison returned to his platoon with the weight of command pressing down on him. Despite their best efforts, his tanks continued to miss targets during practice. Even Sergeant McReynolds, the best gunner in the troop, couldn't compensate for the mysterious issue affecting their fire control. The night before qualification, Garrison found Wallace examining one of their tanks, flashlight in hand, as he studied the ammunition storage compartment. "Sir," Wallace said without looking up, "I think I've figured it out." He explained his theory. The new M1A1's ammunition was temperature sensitive. The fire control computer received temperature readings from sensors inside the tank, but ammunition left outside on the ready racks could be significantly colder. "The computer thinks the powder is 45 degrees, but it's actually closer to 15, Wallace explained. "That's why we're shooting short. Not enough elevation to compensate for the colder powder." Garrison immediately took the information to Mitchell, who arranged an emergency test. They fired rounds that had been temperature stabilized for 2 hours inside the tank, and the results were perfect. Every round hit its target. The next morning, Garrison's platoon qualified with the highest scores in the squadron. Every crew achieved distinguished gunner status, a feat never before accomplished in the regiment's history. Instead of celebration, however, they returned to find letters of reprimand waiting for every platoon leader and platoon sergeant. Colonel Harris had decided to make an example of the entire squadron, regardless of qualification scores. When Garrison received his letter, Wallace was with him in the orderly room. The veteran NCO read the document over Garrison's shoulder, his expression darkening with each line. "This is bullshit," Wallace exploded, startling the troop clerk. "They're blaming us for their failure to understand basic physics." Garrison tried to calm his platoon sergeant, but Wallace was beyond restraint. 22 years I've served, and this is the thanks I get? A letter because some colonel can't admit the brass screwed up the ammunition specifications?" Mitchell entered the room, his face grim. "Sergeant Wallace, that's enough." Wallace spun toward the captain, finger pointing accusingly. "Sir, with all due respect, this is wrong and you know it. My lieutenant identified the problem, fixed it, and qualified distinguished. Now they're putting a letter in his file that could kill his career before it starts." The room fell silent. In the Army, such direct challenge of authority typically ended with severe consequences. Garrison prepared himself to defend his platoon sergeant, regardless of personal cost. Mitchell surprised them both. "You're right, Sergeant Wallace." He took the letters from Garrison's hands. "These aren't going in anyone's file. I'll handle the squadron commander. Your platoons performed exceptionally under difficult circumstances. That's what matters." The incident revealed a side of Mitchell that Garrison hadn't seen before. Beneath the demanding exterior was a leader who protected his subordinates from injustice, even at risk to his own career. 2 weeks later, the letters disappeared from personnel files. Mitchell never mentioned how he accomplished this, but rumors suggested he had taken the issue directly to the regimental commander with evidence of the ammunition temperature issue. The crisis, August 1990. Summer training intensified as the regiment prepared for its annual rotation to the Reforger exercise, the massive NATO operation designed to practice rapid reinforcement of Europe in case of Soviet attack. With the Warsaw Pact dissolving, Many questioned the exercise's relevance, but orders remained orders. On August 2nd, 1990, everything changed. Iraqi forces under Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, sweeping aside the small nation's defenses in hours. The strategic implications were immediate and severe. Iraq now controlled a significant portion of the world's oil supply and threatened Saudi Arabia, America's key ally in the region. Eagle Troop was conducting gunnery training at Grafenvohr when the news arrived. Mitchell called an immediate assembly of all personnel. "Gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying across the assembled soldiers, "war has come again. While I cannot predict the future, I believe the next operation order I issue will be for deployment to the Middle East." A murmur ran through the formation. For soldiers trained to fight in Europe's forests and hills, the prospect of desert warfare represented an entirely new challenge. Effective immediately, all training will focus on desert operations. Mitchell continued, "We have much to learn and potentially little time to learn it." Dismissed. That evening, Garrison received word that he would indeed take command of the scout platoon upon their return to Garrison. The promotion came with both pride and apprehension. Leading scouts during peacetime was challenging enough. Doing so in combat was an entirely different proposition. As promised, Garrison assumed command of 3rd Platoon in late August. The transition from tanks to Bradleys required significant adjustment. While the M1A1 Abrams was a masterpiece of offensive power, the Bradley fighting vehicle served multiple roles: reconnaissance, infantry transport, and anti-armor platform. His new platoon consisted of 13 Bradleys divided into sections, each responsible for covering a specific area of the troops' front. The men were different as well. Tank crews were specialists in their specific positions. Scouts needed broader skills: land navigation, reconnaissance, calling for artillery, even demolitions and obstacle emplacement. Wallace remained with 2nd Platoon, but introduced Garrison to Staff Sergeant Frank Rodriguez, the scout platoon sergeant. "Rodriguez knows more about reconnaissance than anyone in the regiment," Wallace assured him. "Trust him like you trusted me." Rodriguez proved to be a worthy successor to Wallace. At 35, the Puerto Rican NCO had served in scout platoons for his entire 15-year career. His perpetually sunburned face bore the creases of a man who spent most of his life squinting through binoculars, searching for threats others missed. "Scout platoon isn't glamorous, sir," Rodriguez told Garrison during their first meeting. "Tankers get the glory because they make the big boom. We do our job right. Nobody notices because the big fight happens exactly where and when we want it to." The platoon's transition to desert warfare training proved challenging. Everything from movement techniques to maintenance procedures needed modification for the harsh environment they would likely face. Mitchell distributed copies of FM 93, Desert Operations, along with historical accounts of armored warfare in North Africa during World War II. The troops spent hours studying the experiences of Rommel's Afrika Korps and Patton's campaigns against them, extracting lessons applicable to modern combat. "The desert is like the ocean," Mitchell explained during one training session. "No cover, excellent visibility, unrestricted movement in most areas. The advantage goes to whoever can shoot farther, move faster, and coordinate better." For the scout platoon, this meant developing new techniques. In European terrain, scouts could use vegetation and terrain features for concealment. The desert offered no such luxuries. They would need to rely on speed, dispersion, and precision navigation. The crisis of faith, October 1990. By October, preparations for potential deployment had intensified. The regiment conducted a massive field exercise designed to simulate desert conditions as much as possible in Germany's autumn climate. The exercise revealed problems that couldn't be ignored. Vehicles broke down at alarming rates when pushed to maintain desert movement speeds. Navigation systems designed for Europe's well-defined terrain features struggled with the featureless training areas meant to simulate desert conditions. Garrison's scout platoon particularly struggled with the new requirements. Their standard tactics relied heavily on terrain features for orientation and concealment. Without these references, maintaining formation and position relative to the troop became exponentially more difficult. After a particularly frustrating day, when his platoon became separated from the troop during a movement exercise, Garrison found himself questioning his readiness for the responsibility he'd been given. Mitchell had placed tremendous faith in him, and he feared he might fail when it mattered most. That evening, he called his father for the first time in months. "Dad," he said after exchanging pleasantries, "I'm not sure I'm cut out for this." Colonel William Garrison remained silent for a moment before responding. "Tell me what's happening, son." James explained the situation, his rapid promotion to scout platoon leader, the likelihood of deployment, his struggles with desert tactics. "I don't want to let these men down," he concluded. "They deserve a leader who knows what he's doing." His father's response was measured, his voice carrying the weight of his own combat experience. "James, listen carefully. A soldier isn't defined by what he knows when everything's going right. He's defined by how he adapts when everything goes wrong." The older Garrison continued, his voice gaining strength. "When I was in Korea, none of us knew what we were doing at first. We learned by doing, by making mistakes and correcting them before they became fatal. But these mistakes could cost lives," James protested. "All command carries that burden," his father replied. "The question isn't whether you know everything, it's whether you have the courage to make decisions with incomplete information, learn quickly, and put the welfare of your men above your ego." The conversation continued late into the night, with the elder Garrison sharing experiences he had never before discussed. Stories of fear, uncertainty, and the weight of command from the frozen hills of Korea. "Son," he concluded, "a soldier isn't someone who's never afraid. It's someone who feels the fear and does his duty anyway. Can you do that?" James considered the question honestly. "Yes, sir. I believe I can." "Then you're ready. The rest is just tactics, and you'll figure those out." The Crucible, November 1990. On November 8, 1990, President George H.W. Bush announced the deployment of additional forces to Saudi Arabia as part of Operation Desert Shield. The 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment was among the units named for immediate deployment. The announcement triggered a whirlwind of activity. Vehicles needed preparation for desert conditions, supplies required packing, and soldiers faced a mountain of administrative requirements before departure. Mitchell gathered Eagle Troop the morning after the announcement. His message was direct and unflinching. "In approximately 3 weeks, we will deploy to Saudi Arabia. Our mission is clear. Prepare to conduct offensive operations against Iraqi forces occupying Kuwait." He paused, making eye contact with key leaders. "I want to be crystal clear about something. Despite what you may hear from other units or on the news, there will be no ceasefire. The only way home is through the Republican Guard. Focus on the fight, not on rumors of diplomatic solutions." The deployment timeline compressed what should have been months of preparation into weeks. Equipment was loaded onto trains bound for Bremerhaven, where ships waited to transport it to Saudi Arabia. The soldiers would follow by air, reuniting with their vehicles in the desert. Every spare moment was dedicated to preparation. Weapons qualification, nuclear biological chemical protection procedures, combat lifesaver training, and endless briefings on the culture and climate they would soon face. Garrison immersed himself in learning everything possible about his likely opponents. The Republican Guard, Iraq's elite force, was equipped with Soviet-made T-72 tanks and BMP infantry fighting vehicles. While technologically inferior to American equipment, they remained lethal threats, particularly in defensive positions. He spent hours with his platoon conducting chair drills, rehearsing actions and commands for every conceivable situation. They practiced until responses became automatic, until every man could perform his duties in his sleep. "If we're doing chair drills, we're not wasting fuel and maintenance hours," Garrison explained when some soldiers complained about the repetitive training. "When we're in country with our actual vehicles, we'll be ready to execute immediately." During this intensive preparation period, tensions occasionally flared. Garrison and Mitchell had a particularly heated disagreement over the scout platoon's deployment formation. Mitchell wanted tighter intervals to maintain visual contact in the expected sandstorms. Garrison argued for greater dispersion to reduce vulnerability to Iraqi artillery. Their disagreement escalated during a training exercise, with both men becoming increasingly frustrated as they attempted to demonstrate their preferred tactics using golf carts as stand-ins for Bradleys. "Lieutenant, this isn't a suggestion," Mitchell finally snapped. "It's an order." "With respect, sir," Garrison retorted, "an order that will get my men killed for no tactical advantage." The exchange continued to deteriorate until both officers were shouting, their faces inches apart. Physical confrontation seemed imminent until Rodriguez stepped between them. "Sir," the platoon sergeant addressed Mitchell, "perhaps we could try both formations during our next exercise and evaluate the results." Mitchell stepped back, visibly forcing himself to regain composure. "Fine, we'll test both tomorrow. 200 hours. Be ready." The next day's exercise vindicated Garrison's approach. When Mitchell ordered simulated artillery fire on the formations, the dispersed formations suffered 30% fewer casualties while maintaining effective reconnaissance capability. After reviewing the results, Mitchell approached Garrison privately. "Good call, Lieutenant," he said simply. "Your formation is now Troop SOP." He turned to leave, then paused. "That's what I need from my officers. Fight for what you believe is right, even if it means fighting me. Just make damn sure you're right." The moment transformed their relationship from one of mere professional respect to genuine trust. Mitchell had demonstrated that he valued results over ego, a rare quality in leaders of any organization. As deployment day approached, Garrison faced a more personal challenge. His relationship with his fiancée, Rebecca, had become strained under the pressure of impending separation. A schoolteacher in Nuremberg, she had never fully adapted to the demands of military life. Their last evening together before his departure was filled with difficult conversations. "I don't know if I can do this, James," she admitted as they sat in her small apartment. "Waiting months, maybe a year. Not knowing if you are safe." Garrison had no easy answers. "I don't want to lose you, Becca, but this is my duty." "Your duty," she repeated, the word hanging between them like a wall. "Always your duty first." "Not first," he corrected gently, "but I can't pretend it doesn't exist." They parted without resolution, the future of their relationship as uncertain as the conflict awaiting him in the desert. The night before deployment, Garrison couldn't sleep. He sat alone in his barracks room, reading letters from home and reviewing maps of Kuwait and southern Iraq. On his desk sat a small photograph of his father in Korea, standing beside a Sherman tank, young and confident, despite the bitter cold captured in the image. Beside it lay a more recent letter from Colonel Garrison, containing advice that now seemed prophetic. "War reveals character, it doesn't create it. The man you are in peace is the man you'll be in combat, only more so. Be someone your men can trust with their lives, because that's exactly what they're doing." Garrison carefully packed both items in his rucksack. Whatever challenges awaited in the desert, he would face them with the legacy of 3 generations of soldiers behind him. In the pre-dawn darkness of December 6, 1990, Eagle Troop formed up for deployment. The men stood silent in formation, rucksacks at their feet, thoughts turned inward to private concerns and preparations. Mitchell walked slowly along the ranks, making eye contact with each soldier. When he reached Garrison, he paused. "Ready, Lieutenant?" Garrison nodded. "Ready, sir." Mitchell's expression remained serious, but a hint of confidence showed in his eyes. "Keep your scouts sharp. We're going to need them soon." As the formation boarded buses for the airfield, Garrison took one last look at the barracks that had been home. Germany's familiar mist clung to the buildings, so different from the desert that awaited them. The next time he saw these buildings, he would be a different man. Whether better or worse, only time would tell. For now, all that mattered was the mission and the men he led. The weight of command settled firmly on his shoulders as he stepped onto the bus, leaving peace behind and moving inexorably toward war. Saudi Arabia, December 1990. The heat struck like a physical blow as James Garrison descended the aircraft steps onto Saudi soil. Despite extensive briefings about the desert climate, nothing prepared him for the wall of dry heat that enveloped him, immediately parching his throat and stinging his eyes. The temperature exceeded 100 degrees Fahrenheit despite winter approaching on the calendar. Behind him, soldiers of Eagle Troop emerged from the aircraft into the blinding sunlight, expressions of discomfort universal as they adjusted to their new reality. The massive airfield at Tehran bustled with military activity, a testament to the enormous buildup of coalition forces underway since August. Captain Mitchell assembled the troop on the tarmac, his uniform already darkening with sweat despite the early hour. "Welcome to the sandbox," he announced, his voice raised to carry over the constant roar of aircraft. "Our vehicles are scheduled to arrive by ship in 3 days. Until then, We focus on acclimation and continued training. The heat will kill you faster than any Iraqi if you don't respect it. Eagle Troop joined the sprawling tent city that had sprouted in the Saudi desert, rows of olive drab shelters stretching toward the horizon. Their assigned area neighbored units from 2nd Airborne Division, who had arrived in August during the initial deployment. The paratroopers shared hard-earned wisdom about desert survival, how to recognize heat exhaustion before it became heat stroke, techniques for conserving water without risking dehydration, methods for keeping sand out of sensitive equipment. Garrison gathered his scout platoon in the relative shade of a large tent, continuing the training regimen established in Germany. The main difference between European and desert reconnaissance, he explained, indicating a map spread on a folding table, is visibility. In Germany, we rarely had lines of sight beyond 2 kilometers due to terrain and vegetation. Here, visibility often extends to the horizon. Sergeant Rodriguez nodded agreement, which means the enemy can see us just as far as we can see them. In the desert, movement equals detection. For the next 3 days, they conducted training without vehicles, focusing on observation techniques, range estimation, and land navigation using terrain features so subtle they would have been ignored in Europe. Small variations in elevation, barely perceptible color changes in the sand, and distant rock formations became critical reference points in a landscape devoid of traditional landmarks. When their vehicles finally arrived, the real work began. Each Bradley fighting vehicle required extensive modification for desert operations. Air filters needed additional protection from fine sand. Cooling systems required enhancement for the extreme heat, and the standard European camouflage pattern was quickly repainted with tan and brown desert colors. Mitchell established a punishing training schedule. From dawn until dusk, Eagle Troop rehearsed desert movement techniques, gunnery procedures, and tactical formations. Every evening, officers and senior NCOs gathered for detailed briefings on Iraqi forces, studying their equipment, organization, and known tactical doctrine. The Republican Guard is not to be underestimated, Mitchell emphasized during one such briefing. They've experienced 8 years of warfare against Iran. Their equipment may be inferior to ours, but many of their officers trained at Soviet and Western military academies. He indicated a map showing Republican Guard positions near the Kuwait-Iraq border. Intelligence suggests these units will be our primary opposition when the ground war begins. Their mission will be to cover the withdrawal of other Iraqi forces if Saddam decides to abandon Kuwait. For Garrison and his scouts, these assessments translated into specific training scenarios. They practiced identifying and reporting Soviet bloc vehicles at extended ranges, distinguishing between the T-72 tanks of the Republican Guard and the older T-55s and T-62s assigned to regular Iraqi army units. The regiment adopted a motto that became their mantra: find the bastards, then pile on. The scouts would locate enemy formations, fix their positions with artillery and air support, then the regiment's tanks would maneuver to destroy them with overwhelming firepower. Simple in concept, the execution required seamless coordination between multiple elements. Every aspect had to be rehearsed until it became instinctive, every contingency planned for and addressed before lives depended on proper execution. January 1991 arrived with no sign of Iraqi withdrawal from Kuwait, despite international condemnation and an imminent United Nations deadline. Coalition forces continued to build strength, with nearly 500,000 American troops now deployed alongside forces from dozens of allied nations. Eagle Troop moved forward to tactical assembly areas closer to the Kuwait border, increasing the intensity of their preparations as the probability of combat grew. The men sensed the approaching conflict, a nervous energy permeating the unit as they counted down to the UN deadline of January 15th. 2 days before the deadline, Mitchell called his officers and senior NCOs together. "Gentlemen," he said, his expression grave, "I've just come from a regimental briefing. The Air Force will initiate combat operations immediately after the deadline expires. Ground forces are projected to follow within 4 to 6 weeks." He paused, letting the information sink in. "This isn't a training exercise anymore. We're going to war." The Desert Storm, January 17, 1991. The air war began with a fury that exceeded even the most optimistic projections. Wave after wave of coalition aircraft struck Iraqi command and control facilities, air defenses, and frontline positions. The night sky over the border glowed with the distant flashes of explosions and anti-aircraft fire, a surreal light show that Garrison watched from the hatch of his Bradley. "Looks like the 4th of July, observed Rodriguez, standing beside him in the cool desert night. "Let's hope it's as one-sided as it looks," Garrison replied. For the next 5 weeks, Eagle Troop continued preparation while the air campaign systematically dismantled Iraq's military infrastructure. They received a steady stream of intelligence updates detailing the destruction of Iraqi armor, artillery, and supply depots. Mitchell used this time to refine their desert fighting techniques, incorporating lessons learned from constant training. Each platoon developed its unique strengths. Garrison's scouts excelled at extended observation and target identification. The tank platoons achieved remarkable accuracy with main gunfire while moving at speed, and the mortar section demonstrated the ability to shift fires rapidly between multiple targets. The regiment's training culminated in combined arms live fire exercises that simulated their expected missions against the Republican Guard. Bradleys, tanks, artillery, and close air support coordinated to destroy target arrays as representing Iraqi defensive positions. During one such exercise, Garrison positioned his scout platoon on a low ridgeline overlooking the target area. His mission? Identify high-value targets for the tank platoons following behind. Through his thermal sight, he observed the target array, plywood silhouettes representing T-72 tanks and BMPs, positioned in defensive formation behind simulated berms. "Red 1, this is Scout 3, he reported over the radio. "I identify one tank platoon at grid 123-456, oriented south, one BMP platoon at grid 234-567, in prepared positions. Request artillery fire mission, followed by passage of lines for main gun engagement." Mitchell's voice crackled in response. "Scout 3, Red 1, continue observation. Artillery fire mission in effect, followed by tank platoon movement in 3 mics." Within minutes, actual artillery rounds impacted near the target array, marking the beginning of the combined arms attack. Shortly afterward, Abrams tanks from 2nd Platoon crested the ridge behind Garrison's position, their 120mm main guns already tracking targets. "Contact right," announced the lead tank commander. "Gunner, sabot, tank." The exercise proceeded flawlessly with all targets destroyed within the allocated time frame. During the after-action review, the regimental commander personally commended Eagle Troop for their performance. "If the real thing goes half as well as what I just witnessed," he told them, "this war will be over quickly." Throughout these preparations, Garrison maintained regular contact with his father, exchanging letters that took weeks to travel between Saudi Arabia and Pennsylvania. The elder Garrison provided perspective and advice drawn from his own combat experience, creating a bridge between generations of warriors facing different enemies but similar challenges. In one particularly meaningful letter, Colonel Garrison wrote, "Son, you mentioned concern about how you'll react when the shooting starts. Every good soldier shares that worry. I certainly did before my first firefight in Korea. The secret no one tells you is this: training takes over. You won't have time to be afraid until afterward. Trust your training, trust your men, and remember that indecision kills more soldiers than poor decisions." Garrison kept this letter in his breast pocket as a talisman against the doubts that occasionally surfaced in the quiet moments before sleep. Desert Revolution, February 1991. By mid-February, intelligence indicated the air campaign had destroyed approximately 50% of Iraq's armor and artillery capabilities. Coalition commanders determined the ground war should commence while maintaining this overwhelming advantage. The final planning for the ground offensive revealed a bold strategy. While the world expected an assault directly into Kuwait, the main coalition attack would instead sweep wide through the western desert of Iraq, cutting behind Iraqi forces to trap them against the Persian Gulf. The 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment would serve as the advance guard for the Citizen Corps, screening forward to locate enemy forces and provide early warning of counterattacks. This mission played perfectly to the regiment's historic strengths as cavalry, serving as the eyes and ears of the main force. 3 days before the scheduled start of the ground war, Eagle Troop conducted its final rehearsals. Every vehicle underwent comprehensive maintenance checks, weapons received detailed cleaning and testing, and ammunition was distributed according to carefully calculated requirements. Mitchell gathered the troop for a final briefing in their tactical assembly area. Maps were displayed showing their planned route of advance, expected enemy positions, and key terrain features identified by intelligence. "Our mission is straightforward," Mitchell explained, indicating their path of advance with a laser pointer. "We cross the border here, move northeast approximately 40 kilometers, then east to link up with the main Iraqi defensive belt." He zoomed in on the map. Intelligence estimates 2 Republican Guard divisions in this sector, the Tawakalna and Medina divisions. Both are equipped with T-72 tanks and BMP infantry fighting vehicles. Garrison studied the map intently, noting the minimal terrain features along their route. This would be open desert fighting at its most challenging, with few natural advantages for either side. Burns. "The key to success will be speed and violence of action," Mitchell continued. "We hit hard, we keep moving, and we don't give the enemy time to organize an effective defense." He made eye contact with each platoon leader in turn. "Any questions?" Garrison raised his hand. "Sir, latest intelligence on minefields." Mitchell nodded approval at the question. "Good point. We expect extensive minefields along the border itself, but engineering units will clear lanes for our initial advance. Beyond that, prepare for scattered minefields throughout the area of operations." The briefing continued with detailed discussions of communications protocols, casualty evacuation procedures, and rules of engagement. By its conclusion, every soldier understood not just his individual role, but how it contributed to the overall mission. That evening, many soldiers wrote letters home, unsure when they would next have the opportunity. Garrison penned a brief note to his father and a longer one to Rebecca. Though their relationship remained uncertain, he felt compelled to reach out before entering combat. In the pre-dawn darkness of February 22, 1991, Eagle Troop moved to its final positions along the Saudi-Iraqi border. The vast desert stretched before them, silent and foreboding under a star-filled sky. Vehicles idled quietly in the cool morning air, their crews making final preparations inside. Garrison led a small dismounted patrol across the berm, marking the border, verifying there were no immediate threats or obstacles that might impede their advance. They placed infrared chemical lights to mark cleared paths through the defensive berm, creating guides for the vehicles that would follow. As he surveyed the featureless expanse beyond the border, Garrison experienced a moment of profound clarity. All the training, all the preparation had led to this moment. Whatever happened in the coming days would define his life and career in ways he could scarcely imagine. Rodriguez joined him at the berm, his experienced eyes scanning the darkness. "Feels different, doesn't it, Lieutenant? Knowing it's finally real." Garrison nodded. "Different, but somehow familiar. Like we've rehearsed this scene 100 times. "That's because we have," Rodriguez replied with a slight smile. "Now we just have to perform when it counts." At 0400 hours, the order came. Execute Desert Saber. The ground war had begun. The forward edge, February 23rd, 25th, 1991. The initial advance proceeded more smoothly than anyone expected. Eagle Troop crossed the border before dawn, moving through lanes cleared by combat engineers, then accelerating to tactical movement speed once beyond the immediate border area. Garrison's scout platoon led the formation, spread across a 3-kilometer front, with the tank platoons following in echelon behind them. The desert terrain proved surprisingly navigable, allowing them to maintain speeds of 20 to 30 kilometers per hour, despite occasional sand drifts and wadis. The first day passed with minimal enemy contact. Occasional groups of Iraqi soldiers emerged from bunkers to surrender, often before Eagle Troop had even identified their positions. These enemy personnel appeared malnourished and demoralized, victims of 6 weeks of relentless air attacks and supply shortages. Sergeant McReynolds processed one such group of prisoners, directing them to rally points for transportation to the rear. He reported their condition to Garrison over the radio. "Sir, these guys are practically celebrating capture. Say they haven't eaten in 3 days and had no idea we were coming until they heard our vehicles." This pattern repeated throughout the day, with Iraqi regular army units offering minimal resistance. By nightfall, Eagle Troop had advanced nearly 50 kilometers into Iraq without firing more than a few warning shots. As they established a defensive perimeter for the night, Mitchell cautioned against overconfidence. "Gentlemen, we haven't faced the Republican Guard yet," he reminded his officers during an evening briefing inside his command track. These conscripts we're seeing now are not representative of what's waiting ahead. Stay alert. The second day brought marginally increased resistance. Garrison's scouts identified several abandoned Iraqi defensive positions, complete with artillery pieces and supplies left behind during a hasty retreat. Occasionally, small groups of vehicles attempted to flee northward, but most surrendered when engaged by the Bradley's 25mm chain guns. By the evening of February 25th, however, intelligence reports indicated they were approaching the security zone of the Republican Guard's Tawakalna division. Reconnaissance flights had detected increased vehicle movement approximately 20 kilometers ahead of their position. Mitchell ordered increased vigilance and adjusted their formation to provide greater security against possible armored threats. The tank platoons moved forward to support the scouts, creating a more balanced combat formation capable of immediate response to armored contact. That night, a sandstorm descended upon them, reducing visibility to less than 50 meters and grounding the coalition's air support. The howling wind carried fine sand that penetrated every opening, coating equipment, food, and men with a persistent, gritty film. Unable to rely on aerial reconnaissance, Garrison's scouts became the regiment's primary intelligence source. They maintained observation positions despite the punishing conditions, thermal sights providing limited ability to detect vehicle movement through the swirling sand. Shortly before midnight, Rodriguez reported to Garrison from his forward observation post. "Lieutenant, we've got vehicle movement at grid 234567, thermal signatures consistent with tracked vehicles, moving west to east across our front." Garrison immediately relayed the information to Mitchell, who ordered the entire troop to heightened alert status. The storm made positive identification impossible, but the pattern of movement suggested enemy forces establishing defensive positions. The 11th hour, February 26, 1991. Dawn brought little relief from the sandstorm, though visibility improved marginally to several hundred meters. Eagle Troop received orders to continue their advance eastward, with the expectation of contact with the Republican Guard forces within the next 12 hours. The regimental plan called for identifying enemy defensive positions, fixing them with artillery, and close air support when available, then allowing the follow-on forces from the 1st Infantry Division to conduct the main attack. As they prepared to move out, however, Mitchell received updated orders from squadron headquarters. The plan had changed. Intelligence indicated the Republican Guard was attempting to withdraw northward. 7 Corps ordered an immediate attack to prevent their escape. Mitchell gathered his platoon leaders for a hasty briefing beside his tank. "Change of mission," he announced, unfolding a map on the hood of a nearby Humvee. "We're now the main effort. Squadron wants us to advance to phase line smash, identify enemy positions, then continue the attack to destroy their defensive belt." He pointed to a line on the map labeled PL Smash, the 70 easting grid line approximately 15 kilometers ahead of their current position. Garrison studied the map with concern. "Sir, that puts us well beyond artillery support range." Mitchell nodded grimly. "Correct. We'll have priority for close air support, but with this sandstorm, that's not reliable. We're largely on our own." The platoon leaders exchanged glances, the weight of the mission settling on their shoulders. This wasn't the reconnaissance and force they'd trained for, but a deliberate attack into the teeth of the Republican Guard. "Questions?" Mitchell asked. There were none. Every man understood the mission and its risks. "Mount up," Mitchell ordered. "We move in 15 minutes." The advance toward phase line smash proceeded cautiously through the continuing sandstorm. Visibility rarely exceeded 500 meters, forcing the scouts to operate much closer to potential enemy positions than doctrine recommended. Around 1500 hours, the weather began to clear slightly, the howling wind diminishing to a steady breeze that allowed glimpses of blue sky between dust clouds. With the improved conditions came increased tension as the likelihood of enemy contact grew with each passing kilometer. Garrison's lead scout section, commanded by Sergeant McReynolds, reported the first significant contact at 1530 hours. "Scout 3, this is Scout 3 Alpha. Contact. Bunker complex at grid 423876. Infantry dismounting. Hands raised." Garrison acknowledged the report and directed McReynolds to process the surrendering enemy while maintaining observation on the bunker complex. He immediately relayed the information to Mitchell. "Probably another security outpost," Mitchell assessed, "but proceed with caution. This could be their main defensive belt." McReynolds approached the bunker complex with his wingman providing overwatch. As he began processing the surrendering Iraqis, his radio suddenly crackled with urgency. "Contact! T-72s at my 2 o'clock, range 2,000 meters." Before Garrison could respond, the situation exploded into chaos. McReynolds Bradley opened fire with its TOW missile system, engaging the suddenly appearing enemy armor. Simultaneously, reports flooded the radio net from multiple scout sections, identifying enemy tanks emerging from hide positions across their entire front. Mitchell's voice cut through the confusion with practiced calm. "All Eagle elements. This is Eagle 6. Execute battle drill Delta. I say again, execute battle drill Delta." Battle drill Delta was their rehearsed response to major enemy contact. Scouts maintain contact and provide targeting information while tank platoons move forward to engage with main gunfire. Garrison ordered his scout platoon to establish a screen line and identify priority targets for the advancing tanks. His Bradley crews engaged enemy infantry fighting vehicles with TOW missiles and 25mm chain guns, creating confusion in the Iraqi defenses. Mitchell personally led the tank platoons forward, his M1A1 Abrams cresting a subtle rise that had concealed the main Iraqi defensive position. What he saw confirmed they had encountered the Republican Guard's main defensive belt, dozens of T-72 tanks in hull-down positions along a reverse slope, their turrets just visible above the terrain. The Iraqi commander had positioned his forces brilliantly, using the reverse slope to minimize the American armor's range advantage. In open terrain, the M1A1 could engage effectively at 3,000 meters. The reverse slope reduced that advantage to 1,000 meters or less. Mitchell didn't hesitate. His tank fired 3 rounds in rapid succession, destroying 3 T-72s before the Iraqi gunners could effectively respond. The tank platoons spread out on line, each vehicle identifying and engaging targets with devastating accuracy. The battle erupted across a 3-kilometer front, with Eagle Troops' 14 tanks engaging more than 50 enemy vehicles. The desert echoed with the distinctive crack of 120mm main guns and the secondary explosions of Iraqi ammunition stores igniting after penetrating hits. Garrison's scout platoon protected the southern flank, preventing Iraqi vehicles from maneuvering against the exposed side of the American formation. His Bradleys destroyed numerous BMP infantry fighting vehicles and several T-55 tanks assigned to flank security. During this engagement, Garrison experienced his first direct confrontation with enemy armor. His Bradley rounded the southern edge of the bunker complex when his gunner, specialist Hovermail, suddenly called out, "Tank, 12 o'clock! He's traversing toward us!" Garrison looked up from his map to see a T-55 approximately 800 meters away, its main guns swinging toward their position. Time seemed to slow as he processed the threat, his training taking over before conscious thought could form. "Gunner, tee out, tank," he commanded. Hovermail had already begun the engagement sequence. The TOW missile launcher elevated into firing position as he acquired the target through his sight. "On the way," Hovermail announced as he pressed the trigger. The missile launched with a distinctive sound, trailing its guidance wire as it accelerated toward the target. The long seconds of flight time stretched Garrison's nerves to breaking point, knowing the Iraqi tank could fire at any moment. Just as the T-55's main guns stabilized on their position, the TOW missile struck its turret in a blinding flash. The explosion lifted the heavy steel turret completely off the hull, evidence of the missile's shaped charge detonating the tank's internal ammunition. "Target destroyed," Hovermail reported with professional detachment, already scanning for the next threat. Garrison felt no elation, only grim satisfaction at their survival, and a momentary acknowledgement of the lives ended in that burning vehicle. There was no time for deeper reflection as the battle continued to rage across their entire front. Mitchell's voice came over the radio, tension evident despite his controlled delivery. "All Eagle elements, continue to advance. We've broken through their first defensive line. Push to the 73 easting and establish blocking positions." The order surprised Garrison. They had already passed their limit of advance at the 71 easting. Pushing to the 73 line meant continuing 3 kilometers deeper into enemy territory without coordination with adjacent units. He keyed his microphone. "Red 1, Scout 3, confirm push beyond phase line smash." Mitchell's response was immediate. "Affirmative. We have enemy formations retreating eastward." We will not allow them to establish another defensive line. Continue the attack. The decisive moment had arrived. Mitchell had recognized the opportunity to completely shatter the enemy defense by maintaining offensive momentum. It was a calculated risk that violated their original orders, but aligned perfectly with the cavalry's doctrinal purpose: exploit success aggressively. Eagle troops surged forward, tanks and Bradleys advancing abreast through the shattered Iraqi defenses. The coordination practiced in countless training exercises now paid dividends as each element supported the others without need for detailed instructions. As they approached the 73 Easting, Garrison's scouts reported an unexpected discovery. The Tawakalna Division's Reserve Company, 17 T-72 tanks still in assembly area formation, apparently preparing to counterattack. Mitchell redirected the tank platoons immediately, focusing all available firepower on this lucrative target. The Iraqi reserve never had a chance to deploy. Within 30 seconds, all 17 tanks were burning, their crews unable to respond effectively to the sudden onslaught. By 1600 hours, the area between the 70 and 73 Easting grid lines resembled an apocalyptic landscape. More than 50 destroyed Iraqi tanks and armored vehicles burned across the desert floor, sending columns of thick black smoke into the clearing sky. Eagle Troop established defensive positions along the 73 Easting, consolidating their gains and processing dozens of Iraqi prisoners who emerged from bunkers and disabled vehicles. The battle had lasted less than 30 minutes from first contact to securing their objective. Garrison positioned his scout platoon to maintain security to the south and east, wary of potential counterattacks from previously unidentified enemy forces. The adrenaline of combat still coursed through his system, sharpening his senses but also beginning to extract its toll in accumulated fatigue. Rodriguez approached his Bradley, his face streaked with sweat and dust. "Hell of a thing, sir." Garrison nodded, surveying the destruction their troop had wrought. "You were right about no one noticing when scouts do their job well. We identified every major enemy position before they could effectively engage our tanks." Rodriguez smiled slightly. "That's the job. Set up the enemy so our heavies can knock them down." Their conversation was interrupted by a radio call from squadron headquarters, demanding to know why Eagle Troop had advanced beyond their limit of advance without authorization. Mitchell's response became legendary within the regiment. "Tell them I can't stop. We're still in contact and destroying enemy forces." The explanation was technically accurate, but deliberately misleading. Eagle Troop had indeed remained in contact throughout their advance, but Mitchell's decision to continue beyond the 70 Easting had been a calculated tactical choice rather than an operational necessity. Squadron eventually acknowledged the situation, effectively endorsing Mitchell's decision after the fact. The success of the action made criticism difficult, especially as reports from adjacent units confirmed Eagle Troop had shattered the center of the Republican Guard's defensive line. The aftermath, February 27, 1991. As darkness fell over the battlefield, Eagle Troop consolidated its positions along the 73 Easting, maintaining security while conducting necessary maintenance and resupply operations. The men operated with the heightened awareness that follows combat, senses still tuned to detect threats despite growing exhaustion. Mitchell moved among the platoons, checking on his soldiers and assessing their status. When he reached Garrison's position, he found the lieutenant personally inspecting each Bradley, while his crews rotated through brief rest periods. "How are your men, Jim?" Mitchell asked, using Garrison's first name for perhaps the first time since they'd met. "Physically fine, sir," Garrison replied. "No casualties, all vehicles operational with minor maintenance issues." "Mentally processing what just happened." Mitchell nodded. "That's to be expected. Make sure they talk about it. Better out than in." He surveyed the distant burning vehicles that marked their day's work. "I want written accounts from everyone tomorrow. Every soldier, every leader, while the details are still fresh." Garrison raised an eyebrow. "Written accounts, sir?" "This was a significant action," Mitchell explained. "Possibly the largest American tank engagement since World War II. Historians will want first-hand accounts, not just the official reports." Mitchell's foresight would later prove remarkable. The Battle of 73 Easting, as it came to be known, would indeed become a subject of intense study at military academies worldwide, analyzed for its demonstration of modern combined arms warfare. That evening, as the Eagle Troop maintained security, Elements of the 1st Infantry Division began passing through their positions to continue the attack eastward. The massive formation of hundreds of vehicles continued throughout the night, a testament to the scale of the coalition offensive now underway across the entire front. Squadron headquarters reported that Eagle Troop had been credited with destroying 51 enemy tanks, 25 armored personnel carriers, and numerous trucks and support vehicles, all without suffering a single casualty. The one-sided nature of the engagement reflected not just technological superiority, but the cumulative effect of intensive training, tactical proficiency, and leadership at every level. From Mitchell's decisive command decisions to the individual tank gunners and Bradley crews who executed their task with precision, every element had performed exactly as trained. Dawn revealed the full extent of the destruction Eagle Troop had wrought. The desert between the 70 and 73 easting lines resembled a vast junkyard of shattered military hardware. Some vehicles still smoldered, sending thin columns of smoke into the morning sky. Garrison led a small patrol to inspect several of the destroyed T-72s, gathering intelligence on their equipment and capabilities. The damage inflicted by the M1A1's 120mm rounds was catastrophic, with many tanks missing their turrets entirely due to ammunition explosions. Inside one relatively intact tank, they found a map case containing operational graphics for the Iraqi defensive plan. Garrison immediately recognized its intelligence value and secured it for transmission to regimental headquarters. The documents revealed the Iraqi commander had expected the main coalition attack to come along the highway from Kuwait, with only screening forces in the western desert. The massive armored thrust through his western flank had caught him completely unprepared, rendering his carefully prepared defenses vulnerable to envelopment. As ordered, each soldier in Eagle Troop recorded his personal account of the battle. These narratives varied dramatically despite describing the same engagement, reflecting the tunnel vision that affects participants in combat. Tank commanders focused on specific vehicles they engaged. Scouts detailed their observation of enemy movements, and drivers described the challenging terrain they navigated under fire. When Garrison collected his platoon's accounts, he noticed a pattern that Mitchell had predicted. Men who had ridden in the same vehicle often described completely different battles, their perspectives shaped by their individual responsibilities and observations. His own account focused on the tactical decisions he'd made, the coordination between his scout sections, and his direct engagement with the T-55 tank. Reading it afterward, he was struck by how clinical it sounded, devoid of the fear and exhilaration he'd actually experienced. By midday, Eagle Troop received new orders. The rapid success of the ground offensive had advanced the timeline for all units. They would conduct a relief in place with elements of the 1st Infantry Division, then move north to continue reconnaissance operations ahead of the regiment's advance. Before they departed, Mitchell gathered the troop for a brief address. The men assembled in a rough semicircle around his tank, their faces showing fatigue, but also newfound confidence. "Gentlemen, boss," Mitchell began, standing in his turret hatch, "what you accomplished yesterday will be studied in military academies for years to come. You shattered an elite enemy force through perfect execution of combined arms warfare." He paused, his normally stern expression softening slightly. "I am incredibly proud of each of you. You trained hard, you fought harder, and you proved the value of every hour we spent preparing for this moment." The simple praise from their demanding commander meant more to the men than any formal commendation. They had met Mitchell's exacting standards when it mattered most, validating his leadership approach and their own dedication. As Eagle Troop prepared to move out, Garrison found a moment to write a brief letter to his father, describing the engagement in terms the elder Garrison would understand. He finished with words that captured his transformed perspective. "Dad, you were right. When the moment came, training took over. There wasn't time for fear, only action. The men performed flawlessly, beyond anything I could have expected. I now understand what you meant about combat revealing character rather than creating it. These men were warriors before the first shot was fired. The battle merely confirmed what was already there. The value of preparation, March 1991. The ground war concluded with unexpected swiftness. 100 hours after the initial advance, President Bush declared a ceasefire. Iraqi forces had been routed across the entire front, with the Republican Guard suffering catastrophic losses that effectively destroyed its combat capability. For Eagle Troop, the sudden end to hostilities brought mixed emotions. Relief at surviving intact competed with the anticlimactic nature of the war's conclusion. Many had expected a longer, costlier campaign against an enemy whose capabilities had been greatly exaggerated by pre-war intelligence assessments. During the ceasefire, Garrison had time to reflect on the experience and its implications. The one-sided nature of the victory validated the intensive training regimen Mitchell had implemented, proving that realistic preparation truly was the difference between success and failure in combat. More personally, Garrison recognized his own growth as a leader. The doubts that had plagued him before deployment had been answered definitively. He had made sound decisions under pressure, protected his men while accomplishing the mission, and contributed significantly to the troop's overall success. Mitchell approached Garrison as he supervised maintenance on the platoon's Bradleys, preparing for the eventual redeployment to Germany. "Lieutenant," Mitchell said, "I've been reviewing the battle accounts. Your scout platoon's performance was exceptional. Your initial identification of enemy positions gave us the situational awareness we needed to execute effectively." Garrison nodded acknowledgement of the praise. "Thank you, sir. The men did the hard work. I just pointed them in the right direction." Mitchell smiled slightly. "That's what leadership is, Jim. Knowing where to point, when to push, when to hold back." He handed Garrison a folder. "Squadron's recommending you for a Bronze Star with VEED device for your actions during the engagement. Your counterattack against those T-55s protected our southern flank at a critical moment." Garrison accepted the folder with mixed emotions. The recognition was gratifying, but he felt undeserving compared to his men who had faced the same dangers. "Sir, several of my Bradley commanders deserve this more than I do. Sergeants McReynolds and Rodriguez in particular." Mitchell nodded. "They're both receiving appropriate recognition as well." This isn't about who deserves what, Jim. It's about acknowledging leadership under fire. As they prepared to depart the theater, Garrison gathered his scout platoon for a final address in the desert where they had trained, fought, and ultimately triumphed. "Gentlemen," he began, looking at the faces of men forever changed by their shared experience, "when I took command of this platoon, I wasn't sure I was ready for the responsibility. You proved me wrong by exceeding every expectation I had." He paused, organizing thoughts that seemed inadequate to express his gratitude and pride. "What we accomplished here matters, not just for the mission or the war, but for each of us. We faced the ultimate test together and succeeded because of our preparation, our discipline, and our trust in each other." Rodriguez, ever the practical NCO, added the perfect conclusion. "And because our lieutenant didn't get us lost in the desert." The laughter that followed broke the solemnity of the moment, replacing it with the easy camaraderie that had sustained them through the deployment. They were no longer just soldiers serving together, but veterans who had faced combat as a team and emerged victorious. Eagle Troop departed Saudi Arabia in late March 1991, returning to Germany, where they found themselves celebrated as conquering heroes. The regiment's role in the 73 Easting engagement had already become legendary, with Mitchell specifically mentioned in military journals for his tactical acumen and decisive leadership. For Garrison, the return brought personal challenges as well. His relationship with Rebecca had not survived the separation. She had found the uncertainty of his deployment unbearable and decided to return to the United States rather than continue their relationship. The disappointment was genuine but not devastating. The experience of combat had recalibrated his perspective on life's difficulties. A failed relationship seemed manageable compared to the life-and-death decisions he had faced in the desert. His father's response to his combat experience provided the perspective he needed. Upon reading Garrison's detailed account of the battle, Colonel William Garrison sent a letter that his son would keep for decades. "James, welcome to a brotherhood that spans generations. You've now experienced what every warrior since the beginning of time has faced, the moment when preparation meets opportunity, when training confronts chaos. Your response validates everything I hoped you would become as an officer and a man. Remember this, the greatest victory isn't the battle you won, but the losses you prevented through proper preparation and decisive action. Your men came home because you led them well before the first shot was fired. I have never been prouder to be your father." In the years that followed, Garrison would rise through the ranks, eventually commanding a battalion and later a brigade. But nothing in his subsequent career would match the intensity and clarity of those 23 minutes along the 73 Easting, where theory became reality and training translated directly into survival. The Battle of 73 Easting would be immortalized in military history, studied at West Point, and command colleges worldwide as a textbook example of modern armored warfare. Eagle Troop's performance would establish the benchmark against which future units measured themselves, a standard of excellence achieved through the perfect combination of technology, training, and leadership. For Mitchell, the battle launched a meteoric rise through the ranks, eventually leading to general stars and influential positions shaping national security policy. He remained a mentor to Garrison throughout their careers, the bond forged in combat creating a connection that transcended normal professional relationships. On the 20th anniversary of the battle, veterans of Eagle Troop gathered in Washington, D.C. for a reunion. Gray had appeared in their hair, and civilian careers had replaced military duties for many, but the connection remained undiminished. Mitchell, by then a three-star general, raised a toast to the men he had led into battle. Gentlemen, what we accomplished together was extraordinary, not because of the enemy we defeated, but because of who we became in the process. The true victory of 73 Easting wasn't tactical or strategic. It was proving that American soldiers, properly trained and led, can accomplish the impossible. Garrison, by then a colonel commanding a brigade, added his own perspective. The lesson I've carried throughout my career is simple. There are no shortcuts to excellence. We won at 73 Easting years before we crossed the berm into Iraq. We won during those endless training exercises when Captain Mitchell pushed us beyond what we thought possible. We won during maintenance periods when our NCOs insisted on perfection. Excellence in combat isn't created in the moment. It's built through thousands of correct decisions long before the first shot is fired. The legacy of 73 Easting continued to influence military doctrine and training, ensuring future generations of soldiers would benefit from the lessons purchased through the sweat of training rather than the blood of learning under fire. For Garrison and the men of Eagle Troop, this enduring impact represented their greatest contribution, transcending the specific victory they had achieved in the desert. Through meticulous preparation, decisive leadership, and unwavering discipline, they had demonstrated the true meaning of the warrior's paradox. The harder you train in peace, the less you bleed in war. The 73 Easting, February 26, 1991. The sandstorm began to subside as Eagle Troop established defensive positions along the 73 Easting grid line. James Garrison positioned his Bradley fighting vehicle on a slight elevation that offered optimal observation to the south and east. Smoke from burning Iraqi vehicles created an apocalyptic backdrop against the clearing sky, columns of thick black smoke rising from the dozens of destroyed tanks and armored personnel carriers scattered across the desert floor. Inside his turret, Garrison methodically scanned the horizon through his thermal sight, searching for any sign of enemy movement. His body hummed with residual adrenaline, senses still heightened from the intensity of combat experienced less than an hour earlier. The radio occasionally crackled with position reports and situation updates from other elements of the troop, each transmission delivered with a professional calm that belied the enormity of what they had just accomplished. "Scout 3, this is Scout 3 Bravo," came Sergeant Rodriguez's voice over the platoon net. "Southern sector clear, multiple disabled enemy vehicles. Some dismounted personnel appear to be surrendering." "Roger," Garrison responded, his throat dry from the fine dust that permeated everything. "Maintain observation but do not approach without security. Forward surrender information to Red 1. Captain Mitchell's voice broke in on the troop frequency. "All Eagle elements, consolidate ammunition and casualty reports. Prepare to receive elements of Big Red 1 passing through our position." The Big Red 1 referred to the 1st Infantry Division, whose lead elements would soon be advancing through Eagle Troop's position to continue the attack eastward. The thought reminded Garrison of their extraordinary situation. They had penetrated deep into enemy territory, far beyond their planned limit of advance, and shattered an elite enemy formation in minutes rather than the hours or days anticipated in pre-war planning. From his position, Garrison could see Captain Mitchell's tank about 500 meters to the north. The commander stood in his turret hatch, binoculars raised as he surveyed the battlefield they had just dominated. Even at this distance, Mitchell's posture conveyed the confident authority that had guided them through the engagement. Sergeant Scott McReynolds approached Garrison's Bradley on foot, his face streaked with sweat and dust, but wearing an expression of subdued satisfaction. The normally taciturn gunner had personally destroyed 3 enemy vehicles during the battle. "LT, we've got 14 EPWs gathered at the collection point," McReynolds reported, using the military acronym for enemy prisoners of war. "First sergeant wants to know where to send them." Garrison considered the question. Standard procedure called for prisoners to be evacuated to the rear. But with the rapidly evolving battlefield situation, the rear was a fluid concept. "Have them move 200 meters west of our current position," Garrison decided. "Keep a security element with them until the first infantry liaison arrives. They can take custody then." McReynolds nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "Sir, these guys are acting strange. They keep thanking us, like they won the lottery or something." "What do you mean?" "One of them speaks some English, says their officers told them we'd execute them if they were captured. Seemed shocked when we gave them water and field rations." This information confirmed intelligence reports they'd received during pre-deployment briefings. Iraqi commanders had apparently used fear of American brutality to prevent desertion, a tactic that had failed spectacularly once the ground war began. "Make sure they're treated properly," Garrison instructed, "and get an interpreter if one's available. They might have valuable intelligence." As McReynolds departed, Garrison returned his attention to the battlefield. The engagement had unfolded with such speed and violence that he was still processing what had occurred. In approximately 23 minutes, Eagle Troop had destroyed an entire battalion of Iraqi armor, neutralizing a force that on paper should have been a formidable opponent. The reality had proven dramatically different. The technological superiority of American equipment, combined with superior training and tactics, had produced a one-sided result that defied conventional military wisdom about attacker to defender ratios. Mitchell's voice came over the radio again. "All Eagle officers, meet at my position in 5 mics." Garrison acknowledged the order and instructed Rodriguez to assume command of the platoon during his absence. He climbed down from his Bradley, legs stiff from hours in the confined space of the turret, and began walking toward Mitchell's tank. The desert floor was littered with spent shell casings, discarded equipment, and occasionally the personal effects of Iraqi soldiers who had fled their vehicles. Garrison avoided looking too closely at the burned-out tanks he passed, knowing that human remains were likely present inside the blackened hulls. The other platoon leaders converged on Mitchell's position simultaneously. Lieutenant Mike Wilson from 1st Platoon, Lieutenant Dave Reynolds from 2nd Platoon, and Lieutenant Paul Thompson from 4th Platoon all showed the same mixture of fatigue and alertness that Garrison felt. Mitchell stood beside his tank, a map spread on the hood of a nearby Humvee. For once, his perpetually serious expression had softened slightly. "Gentlemen," he began without preamble, "preliminary battle damage assessment indicates we've destroyed approximately 51 enemy tanks, 25 BMPs or other armored vehicles, and numerous trucks and support equipment. No friendly casualties, no major equipment losses." He let the information sink in for a moment before continuing. "Division is calling this the largest tank battle since World War II. I need each of you to have every man in your platoons document their experience while it's fresh. Written accounts as detailed as possible, including specific engagements, ammunition expended, and observations about enemy tactics or lack thereof." Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "Written reports, sir? From everyone?" Mitchell nodded firmly. "Everyone. This engagement will be studied for years. First-hand accounts from all perspectives will be invaluable for understanding what happened here." His foresight proved remarkably prescient. The Battle of 73 Easting would indeed become one of the most thoroughly documented and analyzed engagements in modern military history, a case study in combined arms warfare taught at military academies worldwide. "Squadron is sending a liaison officer to coordinate our handoff to 1st Infantry Division," Mitchell continued. "We'll likely receive orders to continue north within the next few hours, screening the regimental advance. Until then, maintain defensive positions and process any additional EPUs according to standard procedures." As the officers turned to return to their platoons, Mitchell called Garrison back. "Jim, a word." When the others had moved out of earshot, Mitchell spoke in a more personal tone than Garrison had ever heard from him. "Your scout platoon performed exceptionally today. Your initial identification of enemy positions and flank security during the engagement were textbook perfect. Thank you, sir, Garrison responded, somewhat taken aback by the rare praise. The men did their jobs exactly as trained. That's the point, Mitchell said. Training is the difference between what happened today and a potential disaster. Every hour we spent rehearsing in Germany paid dividends here. He paused, then added with uncharacteristic reflection, when I took command of Eagle Troop, I knew you had potential. Your performance today confirmed it. Remember this feeling, Lieutenant. It's what effective leadership produces. The unexpected personal acknowledgement meant more to Garrison than any formal recognition could have. From a commander as demanding as Mitchell, such words carried exceptional weight. As Garrison walked back to his platoon, he noticed for the first time how his perception had altered. The landscape around him seemed more vivid, colors more intense, sounds more distinct. The psychological literature referred to this as the hyperacuity that often followed intense combat, senses still operating at peak efficiency in response to perceived threat. He found his platoon maintaining security as ordered, each Bradley positioned to observe its assigned sector, crews rotating through brief rest periods while maintaining constant vigilance. Rodriguez approached as Garrison reached his vehicle. "Everything okay, sir?" the veteran NCO asked, reading his lieutenant's expression. "Better than okay, Sergeant," Garrison replied. "Captain wants written accounts from everyone about what happened today. Every engagement, every observation, as detailed as possible." Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. "Makes sense. Nobody's going to believe this went down the way it did unless we document everything." "That's partly it," Garrison agreed. "But it's also about learning. What worked, what didn't, how the enemy responded or failed to respond." He climbed back into his Bradley's turret, continuing the conversation over the intercom. "I want you to emphasize the importance of these accounts to the men. This isn't just paperwork. It's preserving what may be a pivotal engagement for future study." "Will do, sir," Rodriguez responded, "though I'm not sure how much tactical wisdom we can extract from a complete rout." "That's exactly what needs analysis," Garrison countered. "Why was it a rout? On paper, they had quality equipment in good defensive positions. Was it technology, training, leadership? Those questions matter for future conflicts." As evening approached, the desert temperature began to drop precipitously, a stark reminder of the extreme environment in which they operated. Garrison ordered his crews to rotate through hot meal consumption, ensuring everyone had proper nutrition while maintaining security. The expected elements of the 1st Infantry Division began arriving shortly after sunset, their massive formation of tanks, Bradleys, and support vehicles creating a continuous rumble that vibrated through the desert floor. The sheer scale of the American armored thrust became apparent as vehicle after vehicle passed through Eagle Troop's position, an endless procession of combat power surging eastward. Garrison coordinated with his 1st Infantry counterpart, a captain named Reynolds who commanded a mechanized infantry company. They established clear fire control measures to prevent fratricide as the units intermingled during the passage of lines. "Heard you guys had quite a scrap," Reynolds commented as they finalized coordination. "Word's spreading fast about Eagle Troop." "We caught them at the right moment," Garrison replied modestly. "They weren't expecting us to push through the sandstorm." Reynolds grinned. "Don't sell it short, Lieutenant. Dropping 50-plus tanks with no friendly casualties isn't luck. That's skill." As the infantry company moved forward to continue the attack, Garrison returned to supervising his platoon's activities. The men had settled into the focused routine of soldiers in a combat environment, maintaining equipment, consuming food when available, catching moments of rest while remaining alert for threats. Shortly before midnight, Mitchell summoned his officers again, this time for updated orders received from squadron headquarters. "1st Infantry has assumed responsibility for our current sector," he informed them. "We're moving north at 0600 tomorrow to screen the regiment's advance toward phase line Denver." He indicated the new objective on his map, approximately 30 kilometers northeast of their current position. "Intelligence indicates elements of the Medina Republican Guard Division may be attempting to establish blocking positions in this area. Our mission is to locate and fix their positions for destruction by follow-on forces." The briefing continued with detailed instructions for movement formations, communications protocols, and contingency plans. Mitchell's thoroughness reminded Garrison of their first encounter nearly a year earlier, when the captain had delivered an unexpectedly detailed operations order for what Garrison had assumed would be a routine training exercise. That memory crystallized in insight. Mitchell's consistent emphasis on detailed planning and precise execution hadn't been excessive perfectionism. It had been deliberate preparation for exactly the type of high-stakes operation they now conducted. As the officers dispersed to prepare their platoons for the next day's mission, Garrison found a quiet moment to begin writing his own account of the battle. Seated on the rear ramp of his Bradley with a red lens flashlight illuminating his notebook, he struggled to capture the essence of what had transpired. The clinical military language seemed inadequate to convey the sensory overload of combat, the simultaneous radio transmissions creating a chaotic soundtrack, the acrid smell of cordite and burning vehicles, the peculiar time dilation that made seconds stretch into minutes during critical moments. He wrote for nearly an hour, filling several pages with his recollections. The exercise proved unexpectedly therapeutic, imposing order on memories that otherwise remained fragmented and chaotic. When he finished, he felt a sense of mental clarity that had eluded him since the engagement concluded. Dawn of February 27 revealed the full extent of the previous day's destruction. In the clear morning light, the battlefield resembled an apocalyptic junkyard. Garrison ordered a small patrol to inspect the closest destroyed vehicles, hoping to gather intelligence on enemy equipment and capabilities. The damage inflicted by American weapons proved sobering. M1A1 tanks firing depleted uranium penetrators had created catastrophic effects, often completely destroying their targets with a single round. Many T-72s were missing their turrets entirely, blown completely off their hulls when internal ammunition stores detonated after penetration. Inside one relatively intact command vehicle, they discovered operational maps showing the Iraqi defensive plan. Garrison immediately recognized their intelligence value and secured them for transmission to regimental headquarters. The documents revealed the Iraqi commander had prepared for a frontal assault along the expected avenues of approach, primarily major roads and recognized mobility corridors. The American decision to advance cross-country through the desert had bypassed many of his prepared defensive positions, catching his forces in vulnerable transition areas. Throughout the morning, each soldier and Eagle troop completed his written account of the battle as ordered. Garrison collected his platoon's submissions, noting with interest how dramatically the perspectives varied despite describing the same engagement. McReynolds' account focused exclusively on the targets he engaged, describing in technical detail the sight, picture, range estimation, and effects on target for each engagement. Rodriguez provided a broader tactical perspective, analyzing how the enemy had failed to effectively coordinate their defensive fires. The most striking account came from specialist Charles Batubin, the diminutive Bradley loader who had climbed atop vehicles during the battle to reload TOW missile launchers despite incoming fire. His matter-of-fact description of actions that deserved valor decorations highlighted the collective humility that permeated the unit. Eagle Troop departed their positions along the 73 Easting at 0600 as planned, moving northward to screen the regiment's continued advance. The day passed without significant enemy contact, most Iraqi forces in the sector having been destroyed or routed during the previous day's engagement. By evening, intelligence reports indicated the ground war was approaching a rapid conclusion. Iraqi forces were withdrawing across all fronts, many abandoning their equipment in the face of overwhelming coalition firepower. The following morning, February 28th, Mitchell gathered the troop to announce the news that had just arrived from higher headquarters. Effective Doro 800 this morning, President Bush has declared a ceasefire, he announced to the assembled soldiers. All offensive operations are to cease immediately. We will maintain current positions and continue processing enemy forces that surrender, but we will not initiate further contact. A murmur ran through the formation as the implications set in. After months of preparation and a brief but intense combat experience, the war had ended with unexpected swiftness. I want to address what you've accomplished, Mitchell continued, his voice carrying clearly across the desert morning. In approximately 100 hours of ground combat, coalition forces have liberated Kuwait and destroyed the majority of Iraq's conventional military capability. Eagle Troop's action at 73 Easting played a significant role in this outcome. He paused, making eye contact with key leaders throughout the formation. Each of you performed exactly as trained when it mattered most. The results speak for themselves. Decisive victory with minimal friendly casualties. Remember this achievement throughout your careers. It validates everything we believe about the importance of realistic training, attention to detail, and aggressive execution. The ceasefire brought a strange mixture of relief and anticlimax. For soldiers mentally prepared for extended combat, the abrupt conclusion created a cognitive disconnect, a rapid transition from life-or-death intensity to relative calm. During the days that followed, Eagle Troop maintained defensive positions while processing surrendering Iraqi forces and beginning preparations for eventual redeployment. Garrison used this time to conduct detailed after-action reviews with his platoon, analyzing every aspect of their performance during the engagement. The key takeaway he emphasized during one such session is that our success wasn't accidental or merely technological. It resulted from systematic preparation and execution. Every vehicle preventive maintenance check we performed, every radio procedure we rehearsed, every gunnery exercise we conducted contributed directly to our combat effectiveness. Rodriguez nodded agreement. And staying calm under pressure. You can have the best equipment in the world, but if you panic when the shooting starts, none of it matters. This observation resonated with Garrison, who had experienced that same clarity during combat, the transformation of training into instinctive action when faced with immediate threat. His father had predicted exactly this response in his letters, drawing on his own combat experience from decades earlier. 1 week after the ceasefire, Mitchell informed his officers that Eagle Troop had been selected for priority redeployment back to Germany. Their mission complete, they would begin movement to Saudi Arabia within days to prepare for the return journey. Before departure, Mitchell arranged for professional photograph of the troop with their vehicles, preserving the moment for posterity. The men stood proudly alongside their battle-tested machines, desert tan uniforms faded from weeks in the harsh environment, faces displaying the quiet confidence of soldiers who had met their ultimate test and prevailed. As they prepared to leave their positions, Garrison took a final moment alone, walking to a slight elevation that provided a view toward the 73 Easting Line where they had made history. The battlefield had been partially cleared by now, some destroyed vehicles already removed by recovery teams, others marked for later processing. The desert stretched endlessly before him, indifferent to the momentous events it had witnessed. In time, the shifting sands would cover the scars of battle, erasing physical evidence of what had occurred. But the experience would remain indelibly imprinted on the men who had participated, a defining moment that would influence their lives and careers for decades to come. Nuremberg, Germany, April 1991. Eagle Troop returned to their home base in Germany to unexpected celebration. The quick victory and minimal casualties had transformed Operation Desert Storm into a triumph for American military capability, with units that had participated achieving near-legendary status in the aftermath. For Garrison, the return brought mixed emotions. His relationship with Rebecca had not survived the deployment. She had returned to the United States during his absence, leaving only a brief letter explaining her inability to cope with the uncertainty of military life. While disappointing, the loss seemed manageable compared to the challenges he had faced in the desert. Professional recognition came quickly. Garrison received a Bronze Star with V device for valor, acknowledging his actions during the battle. Several of his men received similar decorations, their accomplishments formally recognized by a grateful nation. Mitchell received the Silver Star and a promotion to Major, his tactical brilliance during the 73 Easting engagement having caught the attention of senior leaders throughout the Army. Before departing for his next assignment, he met with Garrison one final time. "The Army's changing," Mitchell observed as they shared coffee in his nearly empty office. "This war will influence everything from equipment design to tactical doctrine for the next 20 years. We demonstrated the value of combined arms maneuver in a way that can't be ignored." Garrison nodded agreement. "It almost seemed too easy. I wonder if that creates unrealistic expectations for future conflicts." "Excellent point," Mitchell replied, his expression thoughtful. "The conditions were nearly perfect for our capabilities. Different terrain, different enemy tactics, different political constraints could produce very different outcomes." He leaned forward slightly. That's why I wanted you to document everything so thoroughly. Future leaders need to understand both what worked and why it worked, not just the fact that we won decisively. Before departing, Mitchell offered a final piece of advice that would guide Garrison throughout his subsequent career. Remember that technology and doctrine are important, but people remain the decisive factor. The quality of our soldiers and their training made the difference at 73 Easting, not just our superior equipment. In the months following their return, the Battle of 73 Easting achieved recognition as a defining engagement of modern warfare. Military analysts worldwide study the action, often describing it as the last great tank battle of the 20th century, and a textbook example of American warfighting doctrine put into successful practice. The written accounts Mitchell had ordered proved invaluable for this analysis. The varying perspectives from tank commanders, gunners, scouts, and support personnel created a comprehensive picture of the engagement that allowed detailed reconstruction of every phase of the battle. For Garrison personally, the experience transformed his approach to military leadership. The abstract principles he had studied at the officer basic course had been validated in the crucible of combat, creating an unshakable foundation for his professional development. His father's response to his combat experience provided additional perspective. After reading Garrison's detailed account of the battle, Colonel William Garrison sent a letter that his son would treasure for decades. James, you've joined a brotherhood that spans generations. Your experience mirrors what I and countless others have discovered in combat. When preparation meets opportunity, training overcomes chaos. Your actions validated everything I hoped you would become as an officer and leader. Remember this, your greatest victory wasn't the battle you won, but the losses you prevented through proper preparation and decisive action. Your men came home because you led them well before the first shot was fired. I have never been prouder to be your father. The lessons of 73 Easting continued to influence Garrison as he progressed through his career. When he commanded companies, battalions, and eventually a brigade, he maintained Mitchell's emphasis on detailed planning, realistic training, and disciplined execution. His experiences shaped how he mentored younger officers, particularly his insistence that combat readiness resulted from consistent daily actions rather than last-minute preparations. We won at 73 Easting during training in Germany became his frequent refrain long before we crossed into Iraq. The legacy extended beyond individual careers. The engagement became institutionalized in Army training, with detailed simulations created to allow future generations of soldiers to experience the tactical problems and decisions faced by Eagle Troop. The battle's lessons influenced equipment design, tactical doctrine, and training methodologies throughout the military. Fort Irwin, California, 2005. 14 years after the battle, Colonel James Garrison observed a training rotation at the National Training Center, watching a new generation of soldiers prepare for deployment to Iraq. The war they faced differed dramatically from his experience. An insurgency rather than conventional combat, urban terrain instead of open desert, ambiguous enemies rather than clearly defined military formations. Yet the fundamental principles remain constant. As he addressed a group of company commanders preparing for their culminating exercise, he emphasized the timeless lessons from his experience. Technology changes, enemies adapt, political constraints evolve, he told them. But the foundations of military success remain consistent. Disciplined soldiers executing sound tactics with proper equipment, led by officers and NCOs who understand both the science and art of warfare. One captain raised his hand. Sir, your generation had it easier. You faced a conventional enemy in open terrain with clear objectives. We're fighting insurgents hiding among civilians in urban areas. Garrison nodded, acknowledging the difference. The tactical problems differ significantly, I agree. But the principles don't. Whether you're clearing a city block or attacking across open desert, success still depends on preparation, coordination, and disciplined execution. He continued, drawing directly from his experience. At 73 Easting, we succeeded because we had internalized our battle drills through constant practice. When contact occurred, we executed without hesitation. Your challenges may look different, but that same principle applies. Train until your responses become instinctive, then adapt those foundations to the specific situation you face. As he observed their training exercise the following day, Garrison recognized the enduring value of the lessons from Eagle Troop's experience. While these young soldiers operated in a dramatically different tactical environment, they still relied on the fundamentals: clear communication, coordinated movement, disciplined application of combat power. Washington, D.C., February 26, 2016. On the 25th anniversary of the battle, surviving members of Eagle Troop gathered in Washington for a reunion. Garrison, now a retired major general, entered the hotel ballroom where displays commemorated their historic engagement. Photos, maps, and equipment captured during the operation created a museum-like atmosphere, preserving their shared experience for posterity. Many of the men had not seen each other for decades. Some had completed full military careers. Others had returned to civilian life after their enlistments. Age had silvered their hair and softened their once athletic frames, but the bonds forged in combat remained undiminished. Sergeant Rodriguez, now a retired command sergeant major, greeted Garrison with a firm handshake that transitioned into an embrace. "Good to see you, sir, or should I call you General now?" Garrison smiled. "Jim works fine, Eddie. We're all civilians here." "Speak for yourself," Rodriguez retorted with a grin. "Once a soldier, always a soldier." Throughout the evening, they shared memories, caught up on family developments, and honored those who had passed away in the intervening years. The conversation frequently returned to their shared experience in the desert, analyzing and reinterpreting events that had defined their lives in ways none had anticipated. The highlight of the evening came when General Robert Mitchell, now a distinguished elder statesman of the military establishment, addressed his former soldiers. Despite the decades that had passed, he maintained the commanding presence that had inspired confidence during their deployment. "Gentlemen," Mitchell began, surveying the room filled with men he had led into battle, "what we accomplished together 25 years ago today continues to influence military operations worldwide. The Battle of 73 Easting remains a case study in combined arms warfare, taught at military academies from West Point to Sandhurst to Beijing." He paused, his expression softening slightly. "But the technical and tactical lessons, significant as they are, don't capture what matters most about that day. The true significance lies in what each of you discovered about yourselves under the extreme conditions of combat." Mitchell raised his glass in a toast. "To Eagle Troop, past and present, you demonstrated the enduring truth that properly trained and led American soldiers remain the most decisive weapon in our nation's arsenal." Later in the evening, Garrison found himself seated with Mitchell and several other officers from the troop, discussing how the experience had influenced their subsequent careers. "The lesson I've emphasized throughout my time commanding soldiers," Garrison observed, "is that excellence in combat isn't created in the moment. It's built through thousands of correct decisions long before the first shot is fired." Mitchell nodded approval. "Exactly right. We won at 73 Easting during those endless training exercises in Germany when you all probably thought I was being unnecessarily demanding." "Never," protested Dave Reynolds in mock innocence, prompting laughter around the table. The conversation continued late into the night, mixing serious reflection with the gallows humor that soldiers have always used to process their experiences. They recounted moments of terror, triumph, and absurdity, each story reinforcing the bonds that connected them across time and distance. Before departing, they gathered for a group photograph beside a large tactical map of the engagement. Standing shoulder to shoulder, these veterans of the last great tank battle of the 20th century represented a living connection to a pivotal moment in military history. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, 2021. James Garrison carefully refolded the faded photograph and returned it to the protective sleeve in his desk drawer. His grandson Matthew watched with rapt attention, absorbing every detail of the story he had just heard. "So that's why you have the model tank," Matthew said, gesturing toward the meticulously detailed M1A1 Abrams displayed in the glass cabinet. Garrison nodded, a slight smile softening his weathered features. "That particular tank belonged to Captain Mitchell. He led from the front during the entire engagement on personally destroying 3 enemy tanks in the opening minutes of the battle." "Did you ever see him again after the war?" Matthew asked. "Many times," Garrison replied. "He became something of a mentor throughout my career, rose to 4-star rank eventually, shaped national security policy at the highest levels. We still exchange emails regularly, comparing notes on how warfare continues to evolve." The boy considered this for a moment. And the other men from your platoon? We've stayed connected over the years. Social media makes that easier now, though nothing replaces the reunions we hold every 5 years. Men who face combat together share a bond that's difficult to explain to those who haven't experienced it. Garrison rose from his chair and walked to the cabinet containing the model tank. He carefully opened the glass door and removed the detailed replica, placing it in his grandson's hands. "This isn't just a model of a weapon system," he explained as the boy examined the miniature vehicle. "It represents everything I learned about leadership, preparation, and the human dimension of warfare. Technology matters, but people determine the outcome of conflicts." Matthew handled the model with appropriate reverence, understanding its significance extended far beyond a simple collector's item. "The most important lesson from 73 Easting isn't about tactics or technology," Garrison continued. "It's about the value of disciplined preparation. We succeeded because we trained relentlessly during peacetime, addressing weaknesses before they could become vulnerabilities in combat." He gently took the model and returned it to Matthew's hands. "Keep this. It's part of your heritage now, a reminder that your grandfather once participated in something historically significant. But more importantly, it represents principles that apply far beyond the battlefield. Preparation determines performance. Leadership requires both technical competence and genuine care for those you lead, and excellence results from consistent discipline rather than sporadic inspiration." As evening settled over the Garrison home, the elder and younger generations continued their conversation, bridging decades of experience through shared understanding. The Battle of 73 Easting had long since passed into history books and military doctrine, but its lessons remained vibrant and relevant through the personal connections of those who had lived it. For James Garrison, the 23 minutes that defined his military career had evolved from immediate experience to reflective understanding to generational wisdom. The former lieutenant, who had once questioned his readiness for command, now understood that his journey had always been about more than a single battle, however significant. It was about carrying forward the accumulated knowledge of warfare across generations, ensuring that future conflicts would be fought with the benefit of hard-earned insights from the past. In sharing his experience with his grandson, Garrison completed the circle that his own father had begun decades earlier: the transmission of warrior wisdom from those who had faced the crucible to those who might someday do the same. As darkness fell outside the study windows, the model tank caught the last rays of evening light, its miniature main gun eternally fixed on distant targets across an imaginary desert. More than a replica of military hardware, it had become a symbol of human achievement under extreme conditions, a reminder that proper preparation and disciplined execution could transform ordinary individuals into history makers when the moment of truth arrived. "Grandpa," Matthew said finally, cradling the model carefully, "thank you for telling me the whole story. I think I understand now why this battle was so important." Garrison smiled, recognizing in his grandson's thoughtful expression the same curiosity that had once drawn him to military service. "The battle itself lasted less than half an hour, Matthew, but its impact continues through the lives it touched and the lessons it taught. That's the true legacy of 73 Easting."